Well, nicer clothing at least, Definitely better smells. Well, seriously, people were taking baths back then. But it was good to have variety in a game setting, which, you really didn't have unless you spent the time to write it yourself.
And that's really the important part here is that Ravenloft's setting, and we see this so rarely these days. I keep trying to page through new games, and they have a lot of rules and they have a lot of uh, uh, genre or game specific jargon that is just this self fulfilling circle jerk of like we're awesome because the rules are awesome and because we're awesome. Um, Whereas in Ravenloft, you have a setting that supports the concept. Now, like, okay, case in point, uh, White Wolf. Okay, White Wolf. Everyone talks about White Wolf. Yeah, White Wolf was the gothic punk thing. Well, what made it gothic punk? Well, there was that one artist. But honestly, there wasn't really anything else aside from the fact that there was this one artist, and there were these vampires and werewolves and crap, and like nothing really enforced the gothic punk milieu. They just used words like the gothic punk milieu. You know,
Yeah,
where
these guys are gothic or punk because they hang out in
and they
gutters,
wear
right?
spikes on their collars. They wear collars with spikes on them. Yeah,
And there are those games like Shadowrun or Cyberpunk that actually live up to that whole thing. It's not just, we're sci-fi or stuff because we say we're sci-fi and stuff. And they're the game setting supporting the genre is what we're
yeah.
really talking about.
Ravenloft was great uh, because you sort of get told the rules of the world in advance. You're not getting out. You're not getting away. All you can do is struggle. Yeah, and the best you can do is survive. It's sort of the original. It's fantasy survival horror, and that's something that I honestly don't think has really been done very well afterwards.
Survival horror or fantasy survival
Fantasy
horror?
survival horror, because they're
Because you say survival horror, and I say Call of Cthulhu.
yeah, and sure they probably borrowed a bit from Call of Cthulhu to do it. Call of Cthulhu was the sort of predecessor of it's not about winning, it's about how you go out. Um, so the wheels of time turn and editions change and
Oh
companies
yeah,
go under.
way under. Bloop bloop bloop. I got bought by Hasbro.
Yes, we did. So
Uh,
third edition becomes a thing, and the game gets simplified. But a lot of the sort of storied settings, which we'll get into in later editions, go by the wayside. They
Goodbye, scarred lands.
So they sort of eschew most campaign settings in favor of a somewhat default setting that is Greyhawk
Yeah.
in third edition, which is fairly generic, not terribly interesting, but it
Which is
does.
Middle Earth with not as few wizards.
Don't forget the no common sense in the war that goes on forever.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
So they
But
sort
if you
of.
have common sense in any of these games, then players would have to work, and that's bad for sales.
Yeah, we don't want that. So they eschew sort of these more storied settings in favor of generic one, and they choose to produce. At the time, they only produced
Crap.
one of their own. They
Crap.
produced Forgotten Realms.
Wait, wasn't Eberron one of theirs too?
Eberron came later, though. At first, the only 3.0 one that they put out was by themselves was Forgotten Realms. And,
That's right. That's right.
Because that's their largest franchise, if you could call it that, I suppose.
They remembered Forgotten Realms. Isn't that ironic?
Yeah, but one of the interesting things about D20 was the open game license.
Open game. If you have a company and you want to write a game setting, please, pay
Please
us.
do it for us.
Yes,
So
and
you
you'll
can
have
use-
to pay us for it.
Yeah, so you can. Well, actually, I don't think they even paid. It was free use stuff. They just wanted to promote the game engine, which was a great idea. So they let third-party companies produce campaign settings, and a lot of them did. AEG famously did their Seven Seas
Yeah.
and Legend of the Five Rings, and those were interesting. I've got them on my shelf. They hold a special place there.
Well, yeah, L5R kind of replaced Oriental Adventures, or they kind of
Yeah, it became the default Oriental Adventures.
Yeah.
So, and then Green Ronin put out the World of the Black Company,
Yeah.
which I thought was
Black
rad.
Company was one of the better books.
To this day, it still has some of the best crafting rules.
That's true. That's very true.
But no one really took an old campaign setting that anyone really missed and revitalized it, except like Dark Sun. Except there were online versions of it always, except for White Wolf.
Yeah.
White Wolf put it through Swords and Sorcery Studios.
Which is, we're doing D20 because we don't want you to know it. We don't want you to confuse this with any of the books like Vampire or Mage.
Yeah. So they did Ravenloft. And it was, and I got to tell you, I was, I think this was around the time that I was actually working at a comic book game store, and I saw it on the shelf, and I just flipped my lid. Ravenloft was a very fond memory for me. So.
At the time, they actually released a Ravenloft tarot deck.
Yeah, once upon actually, back in the olden days, there is a something called the Taroka.
Yes,
and that was in a second ed. Actually, that is in that box right there on my shelf.
Oh wow.
Yeah, they had a lot of really fun supplements and dice and so forth. So they put out Ravenloft, White Wolf. Put out this system, and they did a lot for it. One of the big things was they put out gazetteers for all of these regions, and they go into the history of each one, and it's sort of a return to the fluff that we were so fond of.
Yeah, especially because at the time there were so many novels that were coming out that were based on a lot of these worlds. Like that was around the time of Istrad and which was that dark elf guy from.
Oh well, there was the Knight of the Black Rose.
Yeah.
And well, actually, that was a bit earlier. And here's one of the things that actually kind of frustrated me. 10 years later, thinking about it, it's a little irksome because at the time it was Ravenloft. I wanted it, and I had to buy it. And really, when I think back, what were they giving me? They were giving me prestige classes.
Yes,
pretty much. They were giving me feats and prestige classes that were Ravenloft centric,
but they weren't giving you the depth of the world.
They didn't have to, is the thing, because I already had all that. I had books and books and books that were just nothing of depth of world.
Okay.
So I was just buying rules, and at the time I didn't care. I didn't really think about it like that. But now that I think back, I probably didn't need all of that. But at the time, it was kind of a fun thing. To get back into, but anyway, the books revitalized my interest in Ravenloft, dealing with new realms, and I've got sort of a tip of the hat and wag of the finger to White Wolf for doing what they did. And one of the big
careful, I think that's copywritten.
Yeah, whatever. One of the big changes that were made is there were certain realms that were iconic in the original Ravenloft,
mm-hmm.
and one of them, in particular, was, I believe, the realm of Scythia. Now, Scythia was run by one Lord Soth, who was the one of the premier adversaries in the world of Dragonlance.
True, very true.
The so-called almost savior of mankind, who succumbed to
the darkness,
who succumbed to jealousy and fear, and became this Death Knight.
How dare they rip the character of Arthas out of Warcraft before they had the idea?
So, the thing about it was they couldn't use Lord Soth. Dungeons and Dragons, WotC in particular, had put out Dragonlance. Lord Soth was proprietary. So, I applaud them for trying to make continuity a thing between editions. But at the same time, I have to give sort of a tisk-tisk because they kind of tried too hard to adhere to continuity, because there were other realms that they couldn't deal with. There was one with Kaz, who was the lieutenant of Vecna, which is a demigod in Greyhawk. they can't do anything about that. But they try. They made this realm and they gave it like a new Dark Lord and stuff. And let me tell you, Lord Soth's replacement, ironically, was in the book Knight of the Black Rose.
Okay.
There's a minor character named Azrael Dax, who was like a freaking like evil dwarf were-badger. I shit you not, were-badger. Were-badger.
Hang on. Let's just were-badger.
Let's just run that over again. Were-badger.
Were-badger.
Wow. Their badger. So apparently he wasn't copyrighted though, because he became the new Dark Lord. He became the new Dark Lord in the change of editions, which I thought was hilarious.
Well, it's kind of, unless you got a really good writer, we're talking the pussification of an antagonist. We go from the Dark Lord Soth, from whom had a floating castle, to Badger.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a badger.
Don't forget Mushroom.
Oh, yeah.
So, I didn't think it was necessary. It was nice that they wanted to give that nod to a transition between editions, but it wasn't necessary. Really, when you get down to it, none of the books I got for it are particularly necessary, because we're talking about fluff here.
Yeah.
We're talking about, if you want to learn about this game world, find copies of or get PDFs of the older stuff, because that's all rule. The rules were sparse. They have stat blocks that don't mean anything. If you understand what a second ed stat line is, you can take that concept and apply it to any game system. Well, he's supposed to be really strong, really charming.
Yeah, there you go.
Cast spells,
really
whatever.
Really
convincing. So while White Wolf did not add a lot to Ravenloft, in terms of fluff, they did add content and they added relevance. They brought it back to sort of the fore.
And I think that was the really big thing, was the relevance adding. It was able to at least whet the appetite of a whole new generation of gamers.
Yeah.
And remind us old fogies that, there was some stuff cool. I know when they did the transition from 2.0 to 3.0 after all those years, it was like, man, I hope they do Ravenloft.
I'm still holding out for Spelljammer, to be perfectly honest with you. So,
D&D in space. Well, fuck, we already have a Dax.
Yeah, freaking. You know what? Spelljammer, man. That's unfortunately, that's the only one that requires rules. It's the only one that requires rules.
Yeah.
All the other ones, total fluff. I'm totally cool with that. It's the only one like, oh yeah, we actually kind of need a vehicle combat system. Whatever.
Yeah. Just a really quick aside, for those of you guys that don't know, Spelljammer was sort of D&D in space. Like that level on Kingdom Hearts where the gummy bears made your spaceship and you could fly from planet to planet.
Except it wasn't sort of, it actually was D&D. It was literally D&D with space.
Yeah.
Also, racist elves.
Like they're any other kind.
No, I mean, seriously.
Yeah,
we'll get to it. It's
like,
awesome.
Really
So, Ravenloft then is not necessarily a rule set. Ravenloft is a state of mind.
Yeah.
A style, a genre of playing that the initial setting created an atmosphere, or helped you, the game master, create an atmosphere of this dark, gothic, hopeless sense of horror. And I think it's something we're missing a lot these days, because as I was talking about with White Wolf can call itself a gothic punk maloo, but at the end of the day, they're just inventing words. They're just using words like gothic punk maloo and justifying it by art. There's no rules that kind of, or setting really, that kind of pulls it all together, except for the fact.
I definitely get that.
It's
I
like
myself am an urban black superhero.
But you'd be more of an urban black superhero if you just chanted urban black superhero like a mantra all the time, instead of just every now and then.
I don't.
Yeah.
I just get arrested when I'm doing that at the bus stop. Urban black superhero.
There we go. I've got all my coworkers convinced that I never smile. How do I do this? I just tell them I never smile.
That's right.
I smile all
while
the time.
Smiling,
Yeah, while smiling, I tell them I never smile, and they believe it. So, in that sense, Ravenloft really is a state of mind. It is it's an idea, it's a concept, and it's a good one. And it's one that I think a lot of modern tabletop games could benefit from, because players, especially with newer systems and newer rules sort of supporting this idea that there are no losers, there's only the last winner.
Yeah.
Some some players, some groups, some game masters really need a shot in the arm. Like, no, you're doing dangerous, terrifying shit, and you are going to hurt for it.
Yeah, there
You
needs
know,
to be some sense of gravity.
there's some people. There's a reason some people choose to be dirt farmers. Choose to just keep their heads down and work, and that's because
Yeah, just go along to get along, because sometimes shit gets hard.
yeah, like the lady says, man, the night is dark and full of terrors, and that is what Ravenloft is about. It's about the terror of the unknown, the encroaching night, and your helplessness before this just monolithic, faceless evil. Uh, and it's something I to this day I draw from in all of my games.
No, absolutely, absolutely. It was actually kind of funny because there are a lot of games in the horror genre, but not very many in the fantasy horror genre. And this is where Ravenloft really
Shines.
well, not just shines. It explains to us why there aren't very many games in the fantasy horror genre. Because once you got Ravenloft, what else do you need? What
Pretty
other
much.
ideas have not been tapped from the well?
Yeah, I mean, there are other settings that occasionally make a dip or a duck into horror or have elements of horror.
Absolutely,
but
not-
Ravenloft from the ground up was
It's-
built as dark gothic horror.
It is very much. This is Lord of the Rings in hell.
Yeah, whereas, in 3.5 they put out like a 150-page supplement on how to make things more scary.
Right.
But Ravenloft was, designed to be scary and terrifying. Like, it really expounded upon the fear of the unknown.
Right. And speaking of, since we're doing like sort of a comparison thing, do you remember Midnight?
I remember seeing the movie based on Midnight, and it was awful. And I remember,
Same could be said for Pathfinder, man.
yeah. I remember a friend telling me about Midnight, and it sounded really cool. It was like a world where evil had won.
Yeah, it was, much like D&D, Lord of the Rings, but if the Fellowship of the Ring had failed.
Yeah,
If Sauron got the ring back, and if you were good, wrong. And it was like sort of the earthen plane of Ravenloft. They kind of tied in together, where it was like, if you excel in Midnight, then you get to go to Ravenloft. Hoorah! But again, it didn't really capture that setting.
No.
It promised us a lot, but it didn't really capture that atmosphere.
yeah, and I think that might be a failing of the third edition and subsequent rule sets, in that they rely so heavily on this. Say what you will about the D20 system, it's solid. For all of its flaws, it's a solid system, and the one thing that I do like about it is that 9 times out of 10, if you're looking for a rule to adjudicate something, the answer is not good luck with that.
Yeah, that is true.
9 times out of 10, if you're looking for a rule to adjudicate something, there is going to be a rule, or if there's not yet, there will be.
Yeah, they are very
Crunch oriented.
D20 was very, very, very good to rules lawyers.
Yeah, fantastically good. But the thing is that it leaves, I think, people writing for it, they're allowed to lean very heavily on these rules rather than coming up with,
They were laying on them.
Yeah, as opposed to second edition, where the rules were fast and loose. Well, there were
second
rules.
edition. They were. I'm not going to go as far as to say arbitrary, but it was really easy to run a game in second edition if you didn't know the rules.
Yeah, all you needed was the power of your imagination. And
Imagination is much better than fiction.
Yeah. So it was easy for them to write, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages about just setting, because they didn't need rules to support it. You just took regular monsters and threw them into this setting, and every single bit of it just sort of saturated the game environment. And these few little rule tweaks that they added, these few rules that they did add, did nothing but support the setting. Whereas you say in White Wolf, you have systems for determining like vampires and their fear of fire, Rorschach, or supernatural terror. But they aren't really. They just seem to be an innate power of vampires. The setting for Vampire the Masquerade is more about the vampires than it is about the actual world.
And interacting with the world. There was very few consequences. It was like, oh, Fear Fire Rotrek, you mean I get to go nuts and try and kill more stuff? But ain't I just here to kill indiscriminately anyway? Well, no. But you've been letting me kill everything indiscriminately.
Yeah.
Where in Ravenloft, it was, wow, you went nuts and started killing
indiscriminately. Well, guess what? You're going to be doing that forever.
Yeah. And by the way, would you like a cookie?
Yeah. Ravenloft, that's an excellent point. Ravenloft was really big on consequences.
Oh, yeah.
And for a D&D setting, that's fucking amazing.
Yeah, it really is.
You play any other game. Oh, killed the monsters and took their treasure. Those weren't monsters. Those were townsfolk. And those weren't treasure. That was their cart laden with vegetables. I'm winning.
Exactly. It was very much, your loot is making sure that 18 kids starve. Good luck, gamers.
Yeah.
You know.
Whereas in Ravenloft, there's an immediate smackdown for acting a twat. An immediate smackdown, beckoned by the dark powers, and these few rules tweaks that really just serve to sort of cement the setting as this dark, gothic, depressing environment. And so playing in Ravenloft is a rare opportunity. I'm playing in a game now that's ostensibly based off of Ravenloft, and just that knowledge, just that understanding of how Ravenloft works. I'm not trying to metagame it, but that understanding molds and changes how I would ordinarily behave in this world. In this game in particular, I'm playing a chaotic neutral character who somehow is the party's moral compass. Because I understand that bad things happen to good people, and great things happen to bad people, and I don't want any part of either of that. So I'm that guy in the Porsche. 15 will get you 20,
Don't do that, nigga. That shit'll get you 10.
Exactly.
You play the old Black X-Con?
Metaphorically, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, let's go beat up the monster and take the drop. Nah, nigga. All people gonna do is they just gonna keep calling you.
So
keep calling. My kids got stolen. Go kill a monster.
So it's kind of fun to think that after 20 years of this, since this setting first 20 or so years of the setting first coming out, that the second someone mentions that any part of their story is influenced by Ravenloft, suddenly my behavior set change. I think that speaks very strongly of the influence this system of fluff, because it wasn't a system of rules. Ravenloft did not add any rules really to the D&D world, except for rules regarding fear, sanity, and getting cornholed by dark powers.
Yeah, for doing good.
For doing good, and getting rewarded by dark powers for doing bad.
Yeah.
That's all it added. And they were tables. I mean, they were literally like percentage tables. That's it. And you give me 3 percentage tables that completely change the way a game world works, and I will show you Ravenloft. Be perfectly honest with you. A fantastic setting, and one which I will continue to draw influence to, I think, as long as I game.
Oh, fantastic, man. Well, you know what? We've been here for an hour just talking about this setting and its relevance. So let's give these people a break. Let them get back to work or whatever it is that they were supposed to be doing while they were listening to us here. And I want to thank you guys for tuning in to Back in the Deck Fluff Talk. I'm Solar Greye.
And I'm Karl Viking.
And we will talk to you next time, because, man, this is going to be some good stuff. And if there's a game setting that you guys want us to check out and talk about on stuff, or if you got questions or comments, just leave some in the comments below and hit us up. There's also the Twitter, the Back in the Deck Twitter. You can hit me at Solar Greye Twitters.
You have a
Solar
Twitter?
Greye Back in the Deck. Yes, I have a Twitter.
I'm disillusioned.
Yeah, what can I say? I like the tweeting. tweet, 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 smack here, thing from the Dark Lord. You know, what can I say? It's one of those things. But yeah, so come on back next time, and yeah, check out the other stuff on the site too. This is work. All right, I'll talk to you guys later.